Hello, and welcome to this month's Synth Masterclass with computer music. This month, we're going to be looking at how to recreate one of the most iconic synth sounds from the last 50 years. This is the sound of the laser harp, created by Jean-Michel Jarre. While we might have all had the notion and concept in our head that the laser harp itself was an instrument, regrettably, the laser harp was just a MIDI controller. The actual sound of the laser harp was created by Italian synth manufacturer Elka and their machine, the Synthex. While these machines cost an absolute fortune second-hand, we can do a very fine facsimile of this sound using our very own Zebra CM plugin. So let's begin by loading up a copy of your DAW and loading in an instance of the Zebra CM plugin. We'll begin by performing an initialize. We do this by going to the top of the plugin, where we see the display, which also doubles as a drop-down menu. At the bottom of the drop-down, you can see Init for initialize. Click on that, and you've initialized your patch. We would also recommend at this point that you initialize the volume on the plugin. You'll find the master volume down the bottom right-hand side of the plugin. We're going to place it at a value of 50, which is the 12 o'clock mark. You should now hear a sawtooth sound. Let's begin sculpting our sound by moving to oscillator number 1. We're going to leave oscillator 1 set to a sawtooth. However, we want to decrease the volume of oscillator 1 to a value of 60. Remember, every time you change a value on the plugin, you'll see the value represented in the display at the top. Let's now move across to oscillator number 2. Here we need to increase the volume of oscillator 2 to a value of 100. We're also going to leave the sawtooth in play, as it's the default. The element of this synthesizer that gives the laser harp sound its actual timbre is to do with synchronization of oscillators. We're going to synchronize the second oscillator to the pitch of the first oscillator, and we do this by going to the sync switch, which is in the oscillator 2 section, and merely clicking to move it across to the right. At this stage, it probably won't sound very different. Where it will start to sound a little different is when we change the sync pot value to a value of 14. And you can hear it sounds quite reedy now by comparison. The sweeping effect that we're looking to create will be controlled from envelope number 2. And in order to modulate this, we need to make sure that the sync pot is set to accept modulation from envelope 2. So we make sure we select this from the drop-down menu. Now we need to indicate how much modulation we need. We do this by going to the tiny turquoise circle, which is just to the right of the main pot. If you click and hold on that and set it to a value of 28, that's the actual modulation amount. And you can also see around the outside of the pot, we have this orange facade, and that indicates modulation is at play. If you play a note now, it should sound quite different. And it's moving in the direction of the sound we want. At the moment, the sound we have is relatively bright. So we're going to move across to the filter section on the right-hand side and tame some of those upper harmonics. We're going to use the default filter type, which is a low-pass 12 decibel. Moving to the cutoff control, set the amount of that pot to a value of 61. Immediately, you will hear the sound is now really quite radically dull, almost muted. However, we don't need to worry because we're going to be modulating the filter as well. Moving to the lower row of pots in the filter section, we want the middle one, which is user assignable. By default, this is set to envelope 2. We want to change it to envelope number 1. Now set the value of the pot to a value of 43. Now we're hearing a sound like this. You can hear it suddenly brighter again. The reason for redeploying envelope 1 in the direction of the filter is predominantly because envelope 2 is controlling the sweep of the oscillators. Consequently, we can use envelope 1 to control both the modulation of the filter and the modulation of our amplitude, or volume if you prefer. So now we need to make some subtle alterations to both envelope sections. Let's begin with envelope number 1. Set the attack phase to 0, which should be the default anyway. Set the decay phase to 38. Set the sustain phase to 79. And finally the release phase set to 27. Envelope 2 will have some similar settings, but not quite the same. Set the attack phase to 0, the decay phase to 91, the sustain to 0, and finally the release phase to 33. Now we should have our completed sound. we've changed the notes that we're playing so that we don't infringe copyright. However, you can hear that we have something which is very similar to the original sonically. It's worth noting that the speed of the sweep is controlled by the decay pot within the envelope 2 section. So if you want to make this faster or slower, merely change the value of that pot. If we make it shorter, and if we make it longer, now you just need to purchase your laser harp and you'll be good to go. See you next time.